Hi, it's Drew Tignanelli. This is our February 2025 update. Time is flying by, but 2024, Mike, was an exceptional year after an exceptional 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we
Last
also have an exceptional web or article coming out about supporting family members' tax efficiencies and strategy for high income earners. This month's article is going to be the concept of looking at your family with a tax perspective across the generations, and how can you create efficiency by maybe moving income between family members. So, should be a good one if you're in a high tax bracket.
Yeah, anybody who's in a relatively high tax bracket or a business owner, and you have children that are going to college or children that you just want to help, or you got parents you want to help, or whatever. Even if you're not a business owner, if you've got investments that you can allocate and you're in a high tax bracket, there's a lot of cool things you can do, but you just have to know about them. And unfortunately, too many people just give money off to those in need and don't realize that there are
They could have done
exceptional
it in a
tax
tax effective
strategies.
way.
Yeah, that you could do it in a much more effective way and let government pay a good portion of it for you. So
As
anyway, that's a
as
great
to
article coming out.
as to webinars, unfortunately, we had some difficulty last month with some illnesses. So the webinar we announced last month should be coming out shortly, probably very close to the same time as this video. And that was 10 things to do if you're going to retire in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm talking about doing one called How to Review Your Tax Return.
Yep.
Too many people just, get it and say, well, they did it and they just sign it and off it goes. And then, if there's issues, we hear about them later. But anyway, that'll be something that'll come up in the next month or so. Anyway, two exceptional years. Last time that was 97 and 98. So it's interesting where we are right now. Market was going strong in 25 until you all of a sudden had a scare with artificial intelligence and market took a big tumble. But here's the interesting thing, Mike.
Yep.
The market was going up based on 7 to 10 stocks. Those 7 to 10 stocks took a tumble, but yet the market overall, the Dow, was
Yeah.
up in the same day that the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 were down 1.5 to 3%.
Yeah, and you really saw the difference between the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. The Nasdaq has just built up so much more of those tech stocks that
Yeah,
it took the 3% tumble. And, obviously the stock we're talking about is NVIDIA, which lost, considerable amount,
16%.
16%. But, other tech stocks were up. Apple was up.
Well, but Nvidia, the day we're taping this, the day after that big decline, it could be up 5, 6%, they say today, but still, it's markets are, when they get carried away on one subsection of stocks, very small, you've got to be cautious about them when they get really, really high valuations. Anyway, bonds struggled also in 24 again,
Again,
years in a row, 22, 23, and 24. The reason is the Fed manipulated long-term interest rates all the way up to 22. They lost control. When they lost control, the bond market was doomed for 3 years. I think we're at the end of that, and you should see a little more normal bond market from this point on. But inflation is still the key, Mike.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, we've been reporting the inflation numbers in the videos, and the reported number has been, fairly good, but you're still seeing people, really feeling inflation, at the supermarket.
Well, yeah, and we're going to talk about it later. You're feeling it in your insurance premiums a lot.
Absolutely. If you get
Also,
insurance, depending on where you are.
depending on where you are, you got that issue too. But so they say inflation 2.8%, but that's still higher than the 2% they keep saying they want. You just have to be cautious with bonds for right now. Uh, anyway, the economy's still strong. Optimism is rising. That's a good thing. Usually, economies stay strong when the people are optimistic when pessimism starts taking over, they start pulling in the reins. And when that happens, the economy tends to take a downturn. Right now, optimism is rising.
Yep, absolutely. So the day we're shooting this video is January 28th. It's a Tuesday, and the Federal Reserve is having their meeting today. And then tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., Jerome Powell will give a press conference and announce rates. This will be a more interesting one in the sense that from an inflation standpoint, everyone would expect the Federal Reserve to not change rates. However, there is a lot of political pressure from the executive office to lower rates. And, we'll just have to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, well, me personally, I believe rates should come down. You can't continue to have an inverted yield curve where the short-term rates are higher than longer-term rates. Now, right now, you have a bifurcated yield curve. So you got the long-term rates up here, you got short-term rates in the middle, and you got 2 years and are higher than the short rates are higher than the 2-year rates. So you got an inversion in the yield curve. They should bring rates down so that you have a normal yield curve, let the economy go forward. Because inflation is twofold, Mike. It's demand and it's supply. If you want to just crush demand, you can take inflation down all you want. But what you really need is supply to start coming up even more. Housing, for example. Housing has been undersupplied for years since the Great Recession. It needs to be coming back up again. The only way you're going to get that is if the public can start to refinance and buy new places at a lower interest rate than what you're currently getting. But anyway, we'll see what old Jerome wants to do. It will be interesting because you got a lot of political influence on it this time.
Yep.
Gearing up for tax time, the key here is, a lot of people use TurboTax or they might use another preparer, and we're happy. We're fine with all of that. The only thing we care about is let us review your tax return before you file that return, or at least let us review it after you filed it. Because TurboTax is good, Mike, but it's not perfect. You have to know how to enter it, how to strategize, and how to review it. And TurboTax can only do so much. If you click one thing wrong, something's going to go wrong, So
yeah, and there's certain aspects that really intensify this. If we're helping you to do non-deductible IRAs that we do Roth conversions on, then that's a little bit more complicated, and it's easy to get that wrong and pay taxes you don't owe.
Well, and not to mention that there's all kinds of little codes and so forth on all these different forms.
Yeah.
And you need to understand what those codes mean so that when you see that code, you say, wait a minute, because of that code, we can do this. Because of that code, we can do this. And if you're not familiar with those, strategizing. So it's the entry, strategizing, and reviewing. Those are the key things. We don't like doing tax returns. It's a lot of work, Mike.
It is a lot of work.
But if we can at least review your return, that's the key. And a lot of invisible losses are made when you file your tax return and it's not reviewed by a proper eye to look at it. That's what we get. That's what our clients are paying us for, to review there's no cost to have us review their tax return before they file.
If you ever want to see Drew really happy, show him a tax return where he realizes he can make some small, tiny change and, save a bunch of money on taxes, because there's all these cliffs that, we've talked about in previous videos, that you go a dollar over something and then all of a sudden you're taxed on all this additional amount. And, you make a, couple dollar, IRA contribution or some other type of thing, you might be able to drastically change the return results. So
yeah,
that's what we're passionate about.
Let us review it before you file it. We again suggest all of our clients get an IRS.gov login for themselves personally, and that you get an ID PIN to file your tax return. What's an ID PIN? Well, there's a lot of fraud. Do you know how many fraudulent returns were filed last year, Mike? I think the number was 1.5 million fraudulent
Yeah.
returns. If you have an ID PIN, the IRS will immediately identify a return coming in your name that doesn't have the ID PIN on it, and they'll reject it as fraudulent. Okay. If, on the other hand, you don't have an ID PIN and somebody submits a return in my name, now they don't necessarily know. They're guessing that it's fraudulent. Now I come in and file, and what do? They say, well, we don't know who's who, so send your return in via paper. We'll review it. We'll let you know. You know how many weeks, years, months it takes to get
Oh
that?
my gosh.
It's 6 months to 2 years before you're going to get that return finalized when you have to send it in via paper.
Yeah.
So,
And that's at the moment. There's, who knows as time goes on and they keep doing budget cuts.
yeah, ID PIN, great thing. Get an irs.gov, log in, use id.me, and which is an interesting thing in and of itself, id.me. But get it, and then get an ID PIN. And when we go to file your return, whoever files your return, make sure you give them that ID PIN, or your return will not be accepted. Anyway, and it's voluntary, Mike. It's an
Yep.
optional thing. That's the key. It's optional.
But it's a good
Anyway,
option.
there's a new catch-up for people between 60 and 63. I think we might have mentioned this back in December, but I can't remember for sure. So I wanted to state it again.
We did, but might as well drill it back in.
Yeah, so if you're 60, 61, 62, or 63, you can do $11,250 catch-up, not the normal $7,500 catch-up. Don't ask me why those four ages, why that's so big a deal, why just $3,750. I have no idea. I have no idea. Maybe it was a senator or a congressman who looked at it and said, I'm 58 right now. If I could only get an extra $3,750 a year in for the next 4 years, I'll be doing pretty well. I have no idea,
Yeah.
but it's there. So those are
It's on somebody's campaign agenda.
yeah. Here's another one. In 2026, the government is considering forcing everyone who makes $145,000. Why 145,000? I don't know what magic number that is. That's a new one on me, tell you the truth, 145,000. But if you made 145,000 in the prior year, they're going to force you to do your catch-up contribution in 2026 as a Roth contribution. In other words, well, there's a lot of our clients, that's a positive thing, but there's a lot of our clients, we don't want to do Roth. We want to do traditional. So they're taking comments on this right now, Mike. But if they go ahead and implement it next year, that's something that you might need to think about. So it's fascinating.
Well, the state of Maryland has gone from a $3 billion or $5 billion surplus to a $3 billion deficit.
And, I'm sure it was not any of their fault. It was circumstances, Mike.
No, but as you point out, they're really heavily looking at some pretty significant tax changes for the state of Maryland, and I'm not sure whether it's the income tax that's going to be more impactful, but there's no way that imposing inheritance tax on $2 million or state tax on $2 million or more is going to affect a lot of people if it goes through.
Yeah. Doesn't take a lot to be worth $2 million.
Yeah.
Your house and your 401k. For a lot of people who had any kind of income, your house could be worth 500 to 800,000. Your 401k could easily be 500 to 800,000. You're already talking $1 million to $1.5 million or so. It doesn't take a lot to be worth $2 million in today's world.
So what they're proposing is lowering what's the current 5 million?
5 million,
5
but
million.
with portability, Mike. So if you're
10 million
married,
for a married couple.
it would be 10 million, but now they're talking about lowering it to 2 million. And if you're married, you get 4 million. But here's the funny thing. Let's say, Mike, you were married and your spouse passed away in 2021. and you're worth $2 million. So you said, no big deal. It's 5 million in Maryland, and the Fed is 10 million or more. So I'm not concerned. I'm not going to file any estate tax returns, and you just ignore it. Now all of a sudden, Wes Moore changes it to 2 million, okay? But you had to file an estate tax return when that spouse passed away 2 or 3 years ago to get the portability. Now you're going in as a widow or widower with just 2 million as your exemption and no portability because you didn't file the return.
No, you're not, Drew.
What's that?
You're not, because you're going to move.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, well, I guess I'm leaving.
I guess that's what you should do. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody who's worth more than $2 million should not, and Pennsylvania's not an attractive state either, Mike, because it's 4.5% to your children on everything you leave them. In Maryland, it's 16% of anything over 2 million if he passes that law. I don't think he's going to get it passed through, to tell you the truth. I don't know. I don't know how the legislature is acting on this right now.
Well, I know how many of our clients were already moving to Delaware and Florida.
Delaware, Virginia, Florida, those are the places to go, or South Carolina, North Carolina, those are the places to go. But, and here's another one we have to be careful of, is that it usually is that you have to live in the state over 6 months of the year. Now they want to go to the New York issue, Mike, and New York says you own a house and you're in our state for more than 3 months, we're considering you a resident. You're going to pay taxes to us. 3 months with a house. How many of our clients do we know do that? They're 2-3 months of the year and they own a house still in Maryland. And now they're saying, you're going to pay taxes to us. So anyway, we'll see.
And just to be clear, that stuff hasn't passed yet, but it's on the docket and they've got a problem with their budget. So they're going to have to solve it one way or another. And the Democrats generally don't cut spending.
Lastly, Mike, insurance premiums, all types of insurance premiums, whether it's your Medigap insurance, your health insurance, your auto insurance, your home insurance, your long-term care insurance is going up.
Life insurance quotes we've been getting the last couple months have been way high.
We're really focused on auto and home insurance right now in this talk. Those premiums have been skyrocketing for some people. I know I got some really big premium increases. Now I'm in Florida, so you kind of expect some of that. But I don't sit back and just accept it. I'm constantly looking, I'm constantly researching, saying, are there other options? And that's all I'm saying is don't just sit back and say, oh, well, everything's going up. In order for us to achieve maximum wealth efficiency for our clients, they have to help us help them. We can do a lot of things for them without them even knowing what we're doing to help them. But there's some things like when it comes to your auto and home insurance, you've got to help us. You got to be willing to get new quotes. You got to take the time and energy to look at these things and see, can I raise my deductibles? Can I lower? We saw one policy, Mike, where the dwelling coverage on the house was like way more than anything it would cost to replace that place. And his premium was going through the roof. And what we did is we figured out, okay, what would it cost to replace that building there and the whole house? And we could lower the dwelling coverage, which then gave us the opportunity to bring the cost of the insurance down. Also quoting other companies. It's always extremely beneficial. The big ones you see on television are rarely the ones you want to be with.
Right.
So, wealth efficiency requires effort, and inertia is the enemy of wealth efficiency. Not willing to push forward.
I love that term. Excuse me. I love that term you use, invisible losses.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you just sit back and you accept the insurance premium you're having and not realize that you could save $1,500 by requoting your insurance with another company. That's what happens when you file your tax return. Don't realize that little code over there said we could do this which would drop your income by this much and give you the opportunity to pick up this, you know? Those are invisible losses. Anyway, I'm finished pontificating.
Sounds good.
Are you finished?
I'm finished. I'm out of time too.
Anyway, this is Drew Tignanelli saying God bless.